Solomon's Temple, the holiest site in Judaism.
Solomon's Temple was the crowning jewel of ancient history.
Was it built from God's own blueprints?
We know that the Babylonians came at around the year 586 BC and destroyed the temple.
We have no extra-biblical evidence for the existence of Solomon.
Did Solomon and the temple really exist? Was the temple attacked and wiped from history? Holy Land archaeologists search for answers.
It's beautiful to say that the Bible actually describes a very realistic picture.
I see no connection between these remains and the time of Solomon. I'm making a very clear distinction between research and faith.
Was religion's most sacred shrine fact or fiction? Jerusalem, a crucible of faith and religion. Many consider it the holiest city in the world.
It's virtually impossible to come up with the number of shrines and holy places sacred to so many different people over so many thousands of years. This is the central locus of religion.
Biblical scholars say Israel's King David built Jerusalem in the 10th century BC. After wandering for generations, Jews finally had a home. But it was King David's son Solomon who God chose to later build the temple, the resting place for Judaism's holiest relic.
What made Solomon's temple unique was the presence of the Ark of the Covenant. This magnificent rectangular box covered in gold housed the 2 tablets of the law, carved directly by the hand of God on Mount Sinai and handed to Moses. It represented the essential talismanic treasure of the Jewish people, that which distinguished them from all others on earth, that which made them God's chosen people.
King Solomon is one of the best-known figures of the ancient world. Crowned King of Israel while still a teenager, his wisdom was legendary. The temple's location was said to be a hillside steeped in Jewish history, now known as the Temple Mount.
First of all, you have to understand that the Temple Mount is the center of the world. We believe, based on tradition, that the creation of the world started, in a certain sense, with the foundation stone which is inside of the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is named after that rock. Just a little bit to the east of that is the place of the altar. And we believe that from the dust of that place, the first man, Adam, was created, and that on that place he brought sacrifice, Cain and Abel brought sacrifice, Noah brought sacrifice after the flood. So these are central locations for the whole world.
The Temple Mount has been considered by tradition to be the location of the Garden of Eden. It is the place where Abraham came at God's command to sacrifice Isaac. It is where Solomon built his temple.
The temple itself is described in quite a bit of detail in the book of 1 Kings.
It was 90 feet in length and 30 feet wide.
Solomon's temple became God's house on earth.
Once the temple was built by Solomon, we no longer had the option to bring sacrifice anywhere else. The Muslims have Mecca, they have Medina, and a third, distant third, they have Jerusalem. But for us, there's only Jerusalem. That's the direction we've always prayed towards. It's the direction that's always been in our hearts. And that's where it is. The Temple Mount is it.
It was the center of Jewish spiritual life. Its legacy quickly spread.
I think the issue of the Temple Mount is a microcosm of life in the rest of the world. I think because many people have a sense of the importance of religious sites and religious practice to the spirit of a people.
But today, Israel's holiest shrine is under fire. Some archaeologists say the temple, King David, and King Solomon could be exaggerated works of fiction.
Some scholars have a notion of the Temple of Solomon as some sort of a great, beautiful edifice looking like the Parthenon in Athens or a great temple in Upper Egypt. This is not the case.
It would be a shocking blow to biblical authority, reducing the 10th century founders to mythical characters of the past. And it would be a blow to the politics of the region. Today, the Temple Mount represents the struggle between Jews and Muslims. Both sides claim it as their own.
This is where the central struggle of humanity is taking place. So that's Jerusalem, and the center of Jerusalem is the Temple Mount.
It is a contentious debate. History says 2 Jewish temples were built here. Both were destroyed. For 1,400 years, Islam's Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque have stood in their place. Constructed while Jews were banished from Jerusalem. But archaeology on the Temple Mount is forbidden. What lies beneath Islam's sacred shrines remains a mystery.
As archaeologist, I can tell you that Jerusalem is the most complicated site under earth.
We have to understand that the excavation in Jerusalem is very complicated. There's layers above layers. Some of the structures have been reused. Some of them, we don't really know what is myth and what is reality.
The Temple Mount, it's 145,000 square meters in area. I can safely say this is the largest unknown archaeological site in Israel.
Just outside these forbidden walls, archaeologists are searching for Israel's 10th century BC kings, David and Solomon.
If we're talking about the biblical period and biblical figures, of course, we start with King David.
Eilat Mazar of Jerusalem's Hebrew University is searching for King David's lost palace.
The Bible says that Hiram, king of Tyre, built the palace for King David. They were allies. He just, became the king of all Israel, and he suggested to build a palace for him. So the question is where the palace was built.
Mazar believes it was built here, on an ancient site known as the Stepped Stone Structure. The site has puzzled investigators for decades. Mazar says her analysis of ancient relics is revealing a window into the time of King David.
This area was not constructed until the 10th century BC. We know this date because of the pottery that is coming from the lowest floor layer. So it's a huge construction that supports something on the top. This is probably, as it seems now, a according to the date, according to the structure, the sophistication, the location, everything, it shows and indicates for a very high probability that we're talking about King David's palace.
At the Tel Dan archaeological site on the northern border of Lebanon, an ancient inscription was discovered in the 1990s. It brings King David to life.
The Tel Dan inscription is inscribed on a smooth surface of basalt. The letters were linear letters, and these letters were made using a chisel and a hammer, and they would have been readable by a small portion of the population. But it was clearly designed to be observed and seen by people who were coming and going from the city. In other words, it's a sort of propaganda. It was an inscription proclaiming the victory of the Aramean king over a coalition of numerous other kings, among them the king of the house of Israel and the king of the house of David.
Archaeologist David Alon says the Tel Dan stela offered the first solid evidence to the existence of King David.
Before it was found in 1992-93 in several pieces, David was considered by many to be a purely mythological figure. When that was found, then we had an inscription with the name of David that was nearly contemporaneous with his lifespan, that indicated that he was probably an historical figure and the establisher of a royal dynasty that served for hundreds of years.
And just outside the holy city of Bethlehem, Dr. Yossi Garfinkel is revealing more evidence of King David. And this time, David is leading an empire.
And our site was really the first time that we have a fortified city in Judah from the time of King David. This is the big discovery.
At the site known as Chebet Kaiafa, Garfinkel believes these fortified remains are the lost biblical city of Sharaim.
A city called Sha'araim is mentioned 3 times in the biblical tradition, and in this tradition the city is associated with the Valley of Dela and associated with King David. And the meaning of Sha'araim is 2 gates. And here this city is located in the Valley of Dela, and in the city we have 2 gates. So the biblical tradition and the site fits each other perfectly. I remember the first day when I came here like it was yesterday. I was standing on the cliff looking toward the Elah Valley, and I knew that this must be a very important site.
The region was thought to be uninhabited in the 10th century, but radiocarbon analysis of ancient olive pits proved otherwise.
And the big surprise was in the year 2008, after we sent 4 olive pits to Oxford University for dating, and the dating was from the time of King David. And this was really amazing. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the letter.
Garfinkel believes this is not only where King David ruled his empire. He believes Chebet Kaiafa is where David emerged as a great warrior. The site of the Battle of David and Goliath.
According to the biblical tradition, the Philistines came and parked near Soho. And the people of Israel with Saul were standing opposite the Philistines for 40 days. And each day Goliath, a huge Philistine warrior, a giant, came out and said, "Choose between you one person that will fight me. And if we win, you will be our slaves. And if you win, we will be your slaves." And this was the situation for 40 days. And then one day David came, and when David came and he heard the story, he said, "No problem, I'm volunteering to fight the Philistine giant." And what he did, he went to the river, collected 5 stones, and then he came against the Philistine. Sling a stone into his forehead and killed him in one moment.
But as David Alan warns, proving King David is one thing. Solomon and his temple remain a mystery.
Solomon may or may not have existed. As to his temple, did Solomon build it or not? That's a whole other question.
The archaeological sites of Tel Dan and Chebet Kaiafa offer the first real evidence to the existence of King David. But while King David was a great warrior, the temple of God was built by a man of peace.
And the interesting thing about David is that he has all kinds of faults and he did all kinds of bad things.
If you read carefully the biography of David, you see that he was quite a big killer. He killed many people, and he killed all the members of the previous dynasty of Saul. So his way to power was, paved with many bodies. And if you compare it to today's figures, it will be like Saddam Hussein or something like this.
David sinned before the Lord, and the punishment involved a plague.
The tradition says that David established the kingdom and he started to collect building material to build a temple, but he never managed to do it.
Now, according to the biblical text, it was Solomon who was the chosen one.
King Solomon, immortalized in the Old Testament, carries a legacy that has survived thousands of years.
Solomon was famed throughout the ancient world for his wisdom. When he ascended the throne, he was given a choice by the Lord for any gift he desired, and the request that he made was for wisdom, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong so that he could be a good king to his people.
And legend claims Solomon's connections went beyond God, enlisting supernatural forces to aid in the construction. Solomon is known as one of the Western world's great magicians.
Solomon has long had the reputation of a master of magic. Throughout Arabic literature, particularly the Quran and the 1001 Arabian Nights, Solomon is spoken of having had control of the genies and having made alliances with the genies to pour the fire for the temple.
With these gifts, Solomon constructed the most impressive religious shrine on earth.
Solomon's temple was 7 years in the making. It took 70,000 laborers on the Temple Mount, and it created the most enduring and legendary, mythologically rich structure of the ancient world. The famed Temple of God.
But that's just the Bible's interpretation. No archaeological evidence of Solomon has ever been found. Until now.
We are now in the middle of the Temple Mount on the north and the city of David on the south. And this is the area of the Acropolis of King Solomon's.
Archaeologist Eilat Mazar believes she has found the first example of Solomonic ruins, set between King David's palace and the Temple Mount itself.
Now we can show the actual date of this part of the fortification line is as early as the second part of the 10th century BCE. This is exactly the time of King Solomon, and this is exactly what the Bible says.
They are the only Solomonic ruins ever found, just meters from the legendary site of the temple.
Standing here at the city gate, we see that this area is actually on a low level relatively to the area of the Temple Mount. This is more or less what people in ancient times in the First Temple period needed to do in order to come closer to the temple that King Solomon built. They needed to cross the Ophel area where King Solomon's palace was and come near the area of the temple itself.
For decades, no one knew how far back this site dated. Mazar's analysis of ancient pottery has convinced her we are on the temple's threshold.
In order to know when the structure was built, we have mainly two floor layers. The upper one gives us the date of the latest floor. But if we take the material only from the lowest floor, we will have the construction date. And the characteristics are so different from, for instance, the pottery that is coming from the upper layer. It's different. We can see the development. We can see what are the changes in the pottery. Every little tiny piece of sherd we examined, taking only from within. And the most amazing thing is that the pottery is no later than the late 10th century. Any other suggestion will be just a game. It's not serious.
With archaeology in the Temple Mount forbidden, Mazar's Ophel site is as close as investigators will ever get to finding Solomon's temple. But throughout the Holy Land, there is compelling evidence to its existence. According to David Alan, a near replica of Solomon's temple can be found at Tel Dan.
The Tel Dan ritual complex is very similar to what we see in the description of the Solomon's temple in 1 Kings chapter 6. For example, the kind of building stone, the ashlar masonry, that is laid in what we call headers and stretchers. The use of wood that is integrated into the stone construction, which is described again in 1 Kings chapter 6. The tripartite division of the temple, where you have a platform for the dwelling of the deity, and then right in front of that, the altar complex, and then off to the side, surrounding the whole, you have this band of rooms or chambers for priestly functions. So we're at a pilgrimage route, a road with shops on either side of us, and we're talking about something that's about 2,800 years old, 2,800 years old. We have shops on either side. Pilgrims would have come with their animals to bring first to sacrifice. They also would have made purchases or made trades. This would have been something that you saw in Jerusalem, in the temple. Commerce was everywhere. As we continue into the city, we become increasingly more engaged in the cultic, religious aspect of the site.
Finally, a deserted holy structure at the summit. A rare glimpse of what Solomon's temple may have looked like.
This whole compound is like the Temple Mount compound. And now we're walking up the stairs onto the highest platform, which is where the actual temple building, the abode of God, was located. Normally, we wouldn't be able to go up here. Only the priests could come up here.
Now, across one of the world's most fortified borders, And beneath the controversial walls of Old Jerusalem, the foundation stones and the ancient materials of Solomon's lost temple.
Solomon's temple was built of stone, of course, but the stone was covered with the cedars of Lebanon, and those cedars were then covered in gold. The brass, bronze, and copper for Solomon's temple were all cast in Jericho along the Jordan Valley. Materials poured in from all over the region.
It was one of the largest logistical projects in history. Now, 150 kilometers outside Jerusalem, the source for the temple's precious metals may be revealed.
We are in Jordan, we are in southern Jordan, in copper ore district of Finan.
Archaeologist Mohammed Najjar is part of a team that has surveyed more than 200 mines throughout Jordan's ancient Edomite kingdom.
This area is the largest copper ore district in the Levant.
While it was known that precious metals had been produced here for centuries, Najjar's work now reveals that copper was mined here during the reign of King Solomon.
Before we started our project here, everybody was thinking that the Edomites are not visible, archaeologically speaking, before the 7th century.
Today, visible evidence remains of a vast mining empire.
Some of these copper mine shafts can go down for about 50 meters or 70 meters. And then when you reach the copper ore deposit, you start to expand in different directions. It was horrible, for the ancient miners. Slaves had been sent here, criminals. There are some evidence that some of the ancient miners were sitting inside the mines for months. So you can imagine living for more than 2 months in small hole at the depth of about 100 meters under the ground.
Just miles from Finan's mines, smelting operations turned raw materials into workable metals.
So this is one of the smelting sites in Finan area. What we see is the waste product. We see the slags, the waste product of copper smelting. We calculated the amount of copper produced here at about 200,000 tons of copper.
Najjar believes the mines at Finan may be a missing link to Solomon's temple.
We know the description of the temple, and we know that it had been decorated with copper plates and copper pillars. Finan area where we are standing now is only 150 kilometers southeast of Jerusalem. So it would make perfect sense that the copper used in the decoration of the temple was produced here.
Back in Jerusalem, the best visible evidence for Solomon's temple may lie directly beneath the old city walls. Author James Wasserman has studied Solomon's temple for more than 5 years. He explores a network of caverns known as Solomon's Quarry, extending 5 blocks beneath the old city.
These caves go off in so many different directions, they form a labyrinth down here, and no one knows quite how they're carved, but they were excavated over a period of thousands of years. This limestone is called Melech stone, which is royal stone. And this is presumably the stone from which Solomon's temple was quarried.
In the shadow of the remains, he uncovers a window into temple construction techniques employed thousands of years ago.
The process by which these immense blocks were quarried involved taking stones like this and cutting, chiseling their essential shape, leaving them attached on the ground next to each other. There would be a whole floor, let's say, of these kinds of stones. And then they would wedge boards in between them, beams in between each of the stones. They'd be very narrowly together with one another, and then pour water on the boards. And then as the wood, the beams expanded, the idea would be that it would actually break off from the floor of the bedrock. And this is almost an example of what one of them may have looked like. The number of blocks that were used are almost incomprehensible. We're talking about all of the walls of the old city of Jerusalem were built of these rocks, presumably from this very quarry, let alone the temples themselves. The general stones were 2.5 tons each, quite massive. There were thousands, perhaps tens of thousands involved in the construction.
From early evidence of King David at Tel Dan to Eilat Mazar's Solomonic ruins, biblical archaeologists have made a strong case for Solomon's temple and the Old Testament's historical timeline. Most archaeologists believe these biblical secrets lie hidden beneath thousands of years of conflict. But for some opponents, it is not enough.
The more I read into biblical scholarship, I understood that one cannot read the biblical story in a naive way as if one reads, the newspaper of yesterday.
Now, a new approach to archaeology is challenging Israel's past. Low chronology claims the 10th century timelines of David, Solomon, and the temple are wrong. Dr. Israel Finkelstein is the father of low chronology.
Professor Israel Finkelstein is from Tel Aviv University, and he's one of the leading people in the minimalist school.
Israel Finkelstein created a revolution of sorts in our profession. Until Finkelstein came around in the mid-1990s, Most archaeologists were looking at the biblical text in a sort of naive fashion as straight out history.
I am telling my students usually that I am not sure whether I'm right or wrong, but I'm sure about one thing, that I can testify in the court of law that the entire reconstruction of biblical history in the time of King Solomon had been based not exactly on archaeology, but on the understanding of a single biblical verse in the Book of Kings.
In my opinion, Israel Finkelstein is close to brilliant. He likes to tear down sacred cows, and not everybody likes that.
2 hours north of Jerusalem lies the heart of Finkelstein's low chronology. This is Megiddo, better known by its apocalyptic Greek translation, Armageddon. Here, Finkelstein put the Bible to the test, challenging 10th century ruins, believed to be a palace of King Solomon.
First we see the famous palace which had been excavated by Yigael Yadin, the great Israeli archaeologist. It has recently been re-excavated by us and partially reconstructed. Yadin dated the monument to the time of King Solomon and took it as one of the best examples of the greatness of the days of Solomon and the kingdom of Solomon.
Radiocarbon dating has shifted the dates of this site by more than a century, forcing Solomon out of Megiddo's history books.
With all this evidence, which comes from re-evaluating the stratigraphy, re-evaluating the pottery, and radiocarbon studies, radiocarbon dating in recent years, there can be no doubt that this building, this palace, dates to the beginning of the 9th century, to the time of the Northern Kingdom of Israel, and not to the days of Solomon in the 10th century BC.
Finkelstein says Megiddo is just one example of a flawed system of archaeology, relying on the Bible for historical accuracy.
There is a general understanding and agreement that the biblical story on David and Solomon was put in writing the way we see it today, not earlier than the late 7th century BC. That is to say, about 3 centuries after the days of Solomon. And during the 3 centuries, there were elaborations and extensions and expansions of the story according to the needs, theological and ideological, of the authors, of the people of the time.
He disputes the findings of archaeologists throughout the region, including Eilat Mazar's palace of King David.
I didn't have at the time any support of the academic world. I mean, colleagues didn't really trust or supported my theory.
The excavation of the building, which is described by Eilat Mazar as the palace of King David, first and foremost is a very important excavation. However, I don't think that one can identify one single big building which dates to the 10th century BC as the palace of King David. I would date it to the 9th century BC, and I see no connection to the time of King David.
And he believes Yossi Garfinkel's findings at Chebet Kayafa are flawed. He says radiocarbon dating of discarded olive pits is not enough to prove King David's 10th century BC empire.
It does not, I think, say anything about the great united monarchy. I don't think that it shows a very elaborate administration of the time. It does not imply that David ruled over great territory. So Chebet Kayafa tells us a lot and does not tell us other things. And this is the whole trick in archaeology, how to bridge between finds and interpretation.
But Yossi Garfinkel says Chebet Kayafa has delivered low chronology's fatal blow.
Low chronology is collapsing in one moment. It's not slowly, but once Chebet Kayafa was found, a fortified city and 10 radiocarbon dating from Oxford University made on an olive pit, proving the city to be from about 1050 BC to about 970 BC. If you take the biblical chronology, it's earlier than Solomon.
Finally, Finkelstein claims Eilat Mazar's dating of Solomonic ruins at the Ophel site may be centuries off.
There is also this notion there of the city wall of Jerusalem from the time of King Solomon. I see no connection between these remains and the time of Solomon. I see solid evidence from the point of view of archaeology, pottery, the way we date pottery. They should all be dated to late monarchic times. It's probably in the late 8th and 7th century BC.
Eilat Mazar disagrees.
It's not later, it's not earlier, and we can see in parallel to other sites that they have an earlier material and later material, that this is the date that needs to be suggested. So this is the only place, for the time being, that we can point on structures that were so nicely preserved from the time of King Solomon's all over Jerusalem.
While archaeologists debate the existence of Solomon's empire, the Bible records its demise. King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. His lust angered God, bringing an end to his reign and a curse on Israel.
One of the other ways in which Solomon became quite famous was, shall we say, in his personal relationships and the number of wives that he had, or at least the number of relationships he had with foreign women. It is at least purported by some that he constructed temples or idols even to some of these foreign women.
Some of those grand plans like that are maybe a little too grand, or were bound to fail in the long run. It seems that some of these different wives that Solomon brought in led him astray.
Solomon, at the top of the world, with the most magnificent temple in the history of mankind, fell from grace. He began to pay more attention to his own wealth and less to the well-being of his people. He lusted after many foreign women and built temples to those women's gods on the Mount of Olives.
It was a collapse of power that had far-reaching implications, leading to one of history's bloodiest battles.
Solomon was punished by the Lord. Upon his death, his kingdom was divided by a civil war. The ramifications of Solomon's fall, the division and weakening of the kingdom of Israel, has had consequences that last until the present day.
Solomon's kingdom was split in two, finally conquered by the Babylonians in 586 BC. The siege of Jerusalem lasted 30 months.
And we have to take into consideration to surrender to the Babylonians, that means rapes, death, exile. It's horrible. I mean, who wanted that? So people decided that they don't want to surrender to the Babylonians.
Finally, Babylonian armies broke through the city walls.
We know that the Babylonian came at around the year 586 BC and destroyed the temple. This is because the Jerusalem revolt against the Babylonian hegemony in the ancient Near East.
When this happened, Nebuchadnezzar carried off some 10,000 Jews into exile in Babylon. This is the beginning, the first stage of the Babylonian exile. In 586, Nebuchadnezzar's armies completely overran Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, burned the houses, burned the palace, broke down the city walls, and destroyed whatever was left of the Temple of Solomon.
As the Babylonians came there, they took part of the people to exile. They took the king to exile. They took some of the prophets to exile. They basically came and destroyed the temple and the whole surrounding area around Jerusalem.
Jews were driven from their homeland for 70 years. They would return decades later to rebuild Judaism's holiest shrine. This second temple, built by King Herod, would come to be known as the Temple of Jesus. But in 70 AD, Jerusalem and the temple were once again reduced to rubble as Roman forces invaded the city.
In 70 AD, there was all-out war on the Temple Mount. Some 6,000 Jews were slain by the armies of Titus. After the battle, the Roman legions dismantled and destroyed Herod's temple.
Today, many Jews believe the temple should be rebuilt once again. But others say that would be impossible, that the Temple Mount is one of the most divisive places on earth.
For me, the allegory of Solomon's temple is sufficient. It is sufficient for me to understand that God will indwell the purity of my heart if I welcome His presence within that heart.
We don't need a temple in Jerusalem. It's just a building, it's just a place, it's of very limited importance. It's interesting to me as a scholar, as an archaeologist, but I do not need that building or those altars. We're way past that.
There's some people have a mistaken notion that somehow this temple was a place where God lived, as if God was some sort of being that needed a house and that. That's not what God needs. God fills the whole universe. It's not what God is for. All peoples in the world need to understand and read the Jewish tradition, not to become Jews necessarily, but I think if everybody in the world, all religions, all peoples, read Jewish history, they will find something in Jewish history that refracts back to their history and makes it clear.
The Temple Mount is very important for me as an Israeli, as a Jew, not from the point of view of faith, but rather from the point of view of its role in the history of ancient Israel, as well as in the history of later periods, of Roman times, of the Second Temple, of the longings of Jews many centuries later to the longing for Jerusalem, for the Temple Mount, for the Wailing Wall. All this again makes one big accumulation, which is the centerpiece of my heritage and my culture.
From David's victories in Jerusalem to Solomon's downfall, the Babylonian exile, and the temples of the future, the Temple Mount has been the scene of joy and hardship. Today, it symbolizes conflict, one of the most controversial places on earth. 3,000 years after being deemed sacred ground, it continues to define the future.